Boyfriend found out how much money I have. He wants me to pay off a house for us, buy a new car, and fund a trip for him to go abroad. Should I end it? In the heart of a bustling Canadian city, nestled among the clamor and chaos, there lay a small modest apartment that seemed almost misplaced amidst the towering skyscrapers. This was my sanctuary, a place painstakingly curated to embody the values of simplicity and tranquility that I held dear. My name is Mary, and at 28 years old, I had crafted a life quite different from the opulent one I left behind in Italy. Here, in this understated nook, I found peace. The apartment was a one-bedroom affair, with walls painted a soft creamy white that caught the gentle morning light. The furniture was minimal, a comfortable couch, a sturdy coffee table, and a small dining set that had seen better days but still stood strong. The decoration was sparse, with a few carefully chosen pieces that spoke more of sentiment than of monetary value. A small balcony overlooked a quiet street, where the sounds of the city were muted, just enough for me to enjoy my morning coffee in relative peace. Living here, my needs were few, and my desires even fewer. I had learned early on that happiness doesn't come from things, but from experiences, from quiet moments spent reading a book, from laughter shared with a friend, from the soothing ritual of brewing tea. My job as a digital marketing consultant afforded me the luxury of working from home, allowing me to shape my days as I saw fit. This life of minimalism was a deliberate choice, a stark contrast to the lavish, almost grandiose lifestyle of my family back in Italy. My parents and extended family lived in sprawling estates in the countryside, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, their homes adorned with art and antiques that spoke of generations of wealth and culture. My childhood was filled with long, languid summers under the Italian sun, dinners that stretched into the wee hours, and conversations filled with passionate gestures. It was beautiful, yes, but overwhelming. A life where every moment felt orchestrated, every smile a bit too polished. It was during my university years in Canada that I began to shed the weight of those golden shackles. I embraced a life where I could be just Mary, not the heiress, not the future custodian of centuries-old oil paintings or rare manuscripts. Here, I was free to build a life that resonated with who I truly was, not who I was expected to be. Enter James, my boyfriend of 3 years, a Canadian native like myself in age but vastly different in experience. James came from a middle-class family, his life a tapestry of hard work and modest achievements. He was kind-hearted, with a gentle demeanor that belied his rugged exterior. When we met, it was as if pieces of a puzzle had fallen into place. We shared similar interests in music, loved the outdoors, and both cherished the quiet moments of life. His respect for my simple lifestyle only deepened my affection for him. James never knew about the wealth I had left behind. It was a part of me that I kept hidden, not out of shame, but out of necessity. I feared that revealing my family's wealth might introduce a wedge between us, that it might make him feel inadequate, or shift the dynamics of our relationship in ways I couldn't control. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the assets I would one day inherit. In my heart, I believed that preserving this secret was for the best, protecting both James's self-esteem and the purity of our connection. Our relationship was built on the foundations of mutual respect and shared values. We spent our weekends exploring local markets, cooking meals together, or watching old movies curled up on the couch. It was a peaceful, fulfilling existence, and for a while, I believed it would always be this way. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The catalyst came unexpectedly, in the form of an invitation to a family reunion back in Italy. It was an event I couldn't avoid, my grandmother's 80th birthday, a milestone that demanded my presence. As the date approached, the thought of bringing James along filled me with both excitement and dread. I was eager for him to see the country I loved, to experience the warmth of my family. Yet, I was terrified of how he might react when faced with the reality of my background. With a heavy heart, I booked our tickets, telling myself that it was time to face whatever consequences might come. As we packed our bags and prepared for the journey, I felt the weight of my secret heavier than ever. Little did I know, this trip would unravel the delicate threads of our relationship, exposing not only the truths I had hidden, but also the vulnerabilities we both carried. What lay ahead was a test of love and trust, one that would redefine the future of our relationship forever. The plane descended slowly through the cottony clouds, revealing glimpses of the lush Italian countryside, a stark contrast to the sprawling urbanity of Toronto. As the wheels touched down on the runway, a surge of nostalgia washed over me. Italy was not just my birthplace, it was a repository of my earliest and most cherished memories. Beside me, James peered eagerly out of the window, his face lit with the excitement of a child. This was his first time traveling outside North America, and his enthusiasm was palpable. We navigated through the airport with our luggage rolling behind us, the chatter of Italian filling the air like a familiar melody. I could feel James's curiosity bubbling as he tried to catch phrases and words, his eyes wide with fascination. As we stepped outside, my Uncle Luca was waiting for us, his arms wide open, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Benvenuti," he exclaimed, enveloping me in a warm embrace before turning to James with a firm handshake. "And you must be James. Mary has told us so much about you." James chuckled nervously, exchanging pleasantries in his halting Italian, which he had been practicing for weeks before our trip. As we drove away from the airport, the landscape transformed from urban sprawl to verdant vineyards and rolling hills dotted with olive trees. The beauty of my homeland unfolded before us, each turn and dip revealing vistas more breathtaking than the last. Our destination was my grandmother's estate in Tuscany, a place that seemed suspended in time. The house, a sprawling villa built in the Renaissance style, was perched atop a hill, overlooking acres of vineyards. Its ochre walls glowed under the setting sun, and ivy climbed generously over its ancient stones. It was a stark embodiment of the wealth and history of my family, a visual testament to a legacy that stretched back generations. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, the sound of the tires crunching underfoot, James's expression turned from excitement to awe. "Mary, this place is incredible," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. "I grew up playing in those vineyards," I said, pointing towards the green expanse. "And every stone of this house has a story." The grandeur of the villa was overwhelming even for me, who had seen it countless times before. As we entered, the vastness of the entrance hall with its high ceilings and portraits of stern ancestors seemed to impress upon James the reality of my heritage. The house was alive with the sounds of preparation. The reunion was to be a grand affair, with relatives coming from all over the country. During the following days, James was introduced to a lifestyle so vastly different from our simple contained existence in Canada. Each meal was a feast, each conversation a boisterous symphony of voices. My relatives, adorned in fine clothes and speaking with an effortless elegance, moved through the rooms with a grace that belonged to a different era. James tried to blend in, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet, observant demeanor. I watched him as he interacted with my family, his eyes often wide with a mix of admiration and incredulity. It was during a grand dinner, under the chandeliers of the grand dining room, that I first noticed a subtle shift in his attitude. "Everyone here seems to have their life figured out," he remarked quietly as we watched my cousins animatedly discussing politics and art. "It's like they're playing a game where everyone knows the rules except me." I squeezed his hand, trying to offer reassurance. "They've just had more practice at this kind of thing," I whispered back. As the days passed, the initial shock of the opulence gave way to a budding curiosity. James's questions grew more pointed, his interest in the specifics of my family's wealth more pronounced. "So, how does it all work?" he asked one evening as we walked through the vineyard, the sunset casting long shadows on the ground. "Who inherits what? How do you manage it all?" It was a discussion I had hoped to avoid, but there, amidst the rows of grapevines, I found myself opening up about trusts, management, and the responsibilities that came with such inheritance. James listened intently, nodding as I explained, but I could see the wheels turning in his head, the calculations forming behind his eyes. The remainder of our stay was marked by a series of such revelations. Whether it was the casual display of an antique vase worth more than our apartment, or the old family jewels that came out for a cousin's wedding, each instance seemed to embed a small wedge between us. James's demeanor evolved from one of simple curiosity to something tinged with a hint of entitlement. The boundaries of our relationship, once so clearly defined by mutual respect and simplicity, began to blur as notions of what could be started to infiltrate his thoughts. By the time we were preparing to leave, the air between us had thickened with unspoken words and unasked questions. The drive back to the airport was quiet, a reflective silence that seemed to hold the weight of our shared experiences. As the Italian countryside receded into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The trip had not only exposed my wealth but had also unearthed the fragility of our bond. We returned to Canada carrying more than just our suitcases. We brought back a changed dynamic. A new awareness that would soon test the very foundation of our relationship. The seeds of doubt and change sown during those sunny days in Italy were poised to grow into challenges that neither of us could have anticipated. The return to our modest apartment in Canada felt jarring after the lavish expanses of my ancestral Italian villa. As James and I unpacked our suitcases, there was an unspoken understanding that something fundamental had shifted between us during our trip. The light-hearted laughter that had once filled our space seemed dulled, replaced by a pensive quietude that neither of us dared to disturb. In the days following our return, James's behavior began to subtly change. It started with small comments, offhand remarks about, "when we have a bigger place," or, "our future home." At first I thought these were just aspirational dreams, a way for him to process the grandeur we'd witnessed. However, it soon became clear that his views on our financial dynamics had shifted dramatically. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, James broached the subject of real estate. "I saw a listing today," he mentioned casually, his eyes fixed on his phone. "A house, not too far from here. 3 bedrooms, a garden. It's perfect for us." His tone was light, but the implication was heavy with expectation. I paused, a stir of apprehension in my gut. "James, we've talked about this. I'm happy here. We don't need a big house." He looked up, surprise etching his features. "But why settle for this when we can afford so much more? It's about time we lived like we deserve." His words struck a nerve. It wasn't just the presumption of we when he really meant my money, but also his sudden entitlement to a lifestyle he had never contributed to building. Over the following weeks, these conversations became more frequent. James started to bring up luxury cars, expensive vacations, and even investment opportunities. Each suggestion was grander than the last, each plan more elaborate, anchored firmly on the financial security he assumed we, or rather, I, possessed. The strain began to manifest in other ways too. Social gatherings, once a source of joy, turned into platforms for James to hint at our upgraded lifestyle. At a friend's birthday party, he openly discussed our future trips to Europe and the type of car we should buy next. Each claim felt like a chip away at the privacy and principles I held dear. This transformation in James's demeanor placed me in an emotional conundrum. Here was the man I loved. The man who had once cherished our simple life together, now morphed into someone who saw my inheritance as a stepping stone to material indulgences. It was as if the man I knew had been replaced by a stranger with a distorted sense of entitlement. As his plans grew more detailed, our discussions turned into disagreements. One night, as we lay in bed, the tension that had been brewing finally boiled over. "James, where is all this coming from?" I asked, my voice a mix of sadness and frustration. "Why has everything changed since we came back from Italy?" He turned to look at me, his expression a blend of defiance and confusion. "Changed? Mary, I'm thinking about our future. Your money could give us the life we've always wanted." "But at what cost?" I countered. "You're planning our life as if my money is ours. But it isn't, James. It's mine, and it comes with responsibilities and decisions that you're not considering." The room went silent, the weight of our words hanging between us. James's face softened, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had fallen in love with. "I just want us to have the best," he whispered. "I might have gotten carried away, but it's only because I want to build something great with you." Despite his reassurances, the seed of doubt had been planted. The following days were a testament to the changed dynamics in our relationship. James's approach had altered subtly. Where once there was partnership, there now lay a transactional expectation. It was not just about sharing a life but about leveraging my wealth for a lifestyle that he now deemed essential. The practical implications of this shift were significant. Financial discussions, once rare and collaborative, became fraught with tension. Planning for the future was no longer about our dreams and goals, but about managing expectations and defending boundaries. I never thought I'd have to deal with him. My financial independence, a source of pride and empowerment, had become a battleground. Moreover, this shift affected how I viewed our relationship's foundation. Trust and respect, once given freely and reciprocally, now required constant negotiation and reassurance. The egalitarian nature of our partnership, which had been one of its strengths, was compromised. I found myself second-guessing not just decisions about money but the motivations behind James's affections and plans. This evolving dynamic also brought with it an emotional toll. There were moments of profound loneliness, times when I felt misunderstood and cornered. The joy that had once colored our daily life together was now occasionally marred by a palpable tension, making our interactions stilted, our conversations careful. In moments of solitude, I questioned the sustainability of our relationship. Could love endure when it was shadowed by financial imbalance and expectations? Was there a way to reclaim the simplicity and sincerity that had once defined us? These were questions that lingered in the quiet corners of our home, unanswered but increasingly urgent. As days turned into weeks, a palpable tension built between us. The air was thick with things unsaid and wishes unexpressed. It was late one evening, as we sat side by side on our couch with the TV chattering idly in the background, that the facade of normalcy finally cracked. "Mary, why don't we consider moving? Somewhere bigger, maybe even start looking at houses?" James ventured cautiously, his voice tinged with a hesitancy that was unlike him. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw not just the man I loved but also the growing divide between us. "James, why would we do that? This place. It's enough for us, isn't it? Hasn't it always been?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Well, yes. But don't you think we deserve a bit more? I mean, your family lives so differently. Aren't you ever tempted? The question hung between us, dense and daunting. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on us. James, I grew up around all that excess. And yes, it's beautiful. But it's not what makes me happy. I've chosen this life with you because it's what feels right for me. Not because I can't afford any differently. But it's not about what we can afford, Mary, he countered, his voice rising slightly in frustration. It's about what you can afford, and honestly, isn't it a bit wasteful not to use it? His words stung, the implication clear and cutting. I felt a coldness seep into the space between us, chilling the warmth we had cultivated over our years together. Is that how you see it, James? My family's money is a resource for us to tap into whenever we feel like it? Because that's not how I view it. That money, it comes with strings, with expectations and responsibilities that you don't understand. James looked taken aback, his expression softening. I didn't mean it like that, Mary. I just thought, what? That suddenly because my family has money, our plans, our dreams should change? My voice was sharper than I intended, edged with a bitterness that tasted foreign on my tongue. He paused, the air thick with our unsaid thoughts, before he reached for my hand, his touch tentative. I'm sorry, Mary. I suppose I got carried away. It's just all so new to me. I never thought I'd be close to someone with so much possibility. I pulled my hand gently from his grasp, needing the space to gather my thoughts. James, my family's wealth isn't what I want our life to be about. I love our life, our home, just as it is. I don't want that to change because of money. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that punctured the tension. I understand, or at least I'll try to. I love you, Mary. I love this life we've built. I don't want to lose it over fantasies of something that might not even make us happy. It was then I realized how deeply entangled our dreams had become with the reality of my heritage. We sat together, the distance between us filled with the echo of our words, slowly finding our way back to each other. I'm sorry for pushing, James murmured after a long silence, his voice low. I'll respect your feelings about this. We can go as slow as you need. Let's just keep living our life, our way. I nodded, feeling a fragile peace settle over us. It was a temporary resolution, a band-aid over a wound that needed more than just promises to heal. But it was a start, a recognition of our mutual desire to preserve what we had, even in the face of tempting possibilities. As we turned back to the flickering light of the TV, a small smile passed between us, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities of love and wealth, and the simple truth that sometimes, holding on to what you value most requires letting go of what the world tells you should matter. Update. The weeks following our muted confrontation were a study in fragile normalcy. James and I navigated our days with a cautious tenderness, each of us aware of the unspoken fissures slowly spreading beneath the surface of our relationship. I believed, perhaps naively, that we could mend what had been strained by the revelations of wealth and differing desires. But the real test of our bond was yet to come. A test that would shatter the tentative peace we had brokered. The betrayal came on an unexpectedly warm evening, at a gathering hosted by a close friend. It was the kind of casual event we had attended countless times before, a backyard barbecue, where the smell of grilling mixed with laughter and music floated on the late summer air. James and I arrived together, hands linked, our smiles a bit too practiced, too ready. As the evening progressed, I noticed James slipping more comfortably into the crowd, his laughter a little louder, his gestures more expansive with every drink he consumed. I mingled too, but with a mind distracted by the watchful maintenance of my facade. It wasn't until I was by the makeshift bar, fetching us another round of drinks, that I overheard it. No, you don't understand. Mary can afford way more than this. Her family is loaded. She's basically set for life, James was boasting, the words floating over to me, sharp and clear above the hum of party chatter. Frozen, drink in hand, my heart raced as I processed his words. A group of acquaintances around him laughed, someone whistling low in admiration. Seriously, man, that's wild. And here you are living in that tiny place? Another voice chimed in, half joking, half serious. I felt the air leave my lungs in a whoosh, my presence at the bar suddenly suffocating. The casual betrayal, the ease with which James shared my most guarded secret, the very essence of my fears, was laid bare in those few flippant words. Navigating my way back to him, the cold grip of dread tightening around my heart, I intercepted his boisterous storytelling. James, can I speak with you? In private? My voice was calm, but it carried an edge, a signal not lost on him. His face changed as he followed me to a quiet corner of the yard, the mirth fading, replaced by a dawning realization of the gravity of his mistake. Mary, Did you think it was your news to share? I interrupted, the hurt making my words sharper, colder. Did you think it wouldn't matter to me? He stammered, a mix of alcohol and genuine remorse muddling his words. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would be a big deal. I got carried away, and you decided my privacy, my trust wasn't worth respecting. I could hear the bitter disappointment in my own voice, a sound I never wanted to direct at him. Mary, I made a mistake. Please, let's just go home and talk about this, he pleaded, reaching for my arm. I pulled away, my decision crystallizing with stark clarity. No, James, we can't just talk it away this time. This isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal. The rest of the evening was a blur of hushed apologies and quiet exits. We left separately, the ride home a solitary journey for each of us, filled with the echoing words of what had passed between us. That night, alone in the apartment we had shared, the walls seemed to close in on me. Each shared memory now tinged with the stain of betrayal. The breakup was as inevitable as the dawn. When James returned the next morning, his eyes hopeful yet wary, I knew what needed to be said. I can't do this, James. Your actions last night showed me just how little you respect what I hold dear. But Mary, everyone makes mistakes. I know I messed up, but I can fix this. We can fix this, he insisted, desperation lacing his voice. This wasn't just a slip, James. It was a choice. You chose to share something deeply personal about me, not out of love or necessity, but for entertainment. I can't build a life with someone who values their momentary status over our trust. His protests faded as the finality of my words settled between us. The breakup, though unilateral in declaration, was mutual in its necessity. We parted with a heavy silence, the kind that speaks louder than any words of farewell. In the days that followed, the fallout was both personal and social. Mutual friends, caught between allegiances, offered awkward condolences or curious probes masked as concern. I found solace in solitude, turning to my passion for painting, letting the colors express the turmoil that words could not. Each brushstroke was a step towards healing, a way to reclaim the peace that had been disrupted. The betrayal had not just ended a relationship, it had forced me to confront the vulnerabilities I had tried so hard to shield. But in that confrontation, there was growth. I learned that my values were not just preferences but necessities, the core of who I was and who I would continue to be, with or without someone by my side. As I painted, the hues blending on the canvas, I realized that this ending was not just an end, but a beginning. A chance to redefine my boundaries, to strengthen my resolve, and to ensure that my next chapter would be one where trust was not just given, but earned. The days after the party were a haze of conflicting emotions. I vacillated between anger and sadness, betrayal and a strange sense of liberation. The realization that James had so casually disclosed my family's wealth to people who had no business knowing gnawed at me. It wasn't just the fact that he had spoken out of turn, it was the casual disregard for my feelings, the thoughtlessness of his actions. Each time I replayed the scene in my head, my resolve hardened. I couldn't continue a relationship where such fundamental trust was so easily broken. I needed time to think, to process the gravity of what had happened. I spent hours walking through the city, the familiar streets providing a backdrop for my swirling thoughts. By the end of the third day, I knew what I had to do. When James returned home, he looked hopeful, as if expecting that time had softened my stance. I asked him to sit with me, our small living room suddenly feeling too large, too empty. James, we need to talk, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He nodded, his eyes searching mine for a hint of reconciliation. I know, Mary, I'm really sorry about what happened. I was drunk and stupid, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I know you didn't mean to, I said, trying to keep my tone even. But you did hurt me, deeply. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a breach of trust, something that's fundamental to any relationship. He looked down, the weight of my words settling in. I understand that. And I promise it won't happen again. I'll do anything to make it right. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the hardest part. James, this isn't just about making it right. It's about the fact that you saw my family's wealth and it changed something in you. You started seeing my money as ours, and that's not what I want for my life. He looked up, a hint of desperation in his eyes. So what are you saying? You want to end things over this? I'm saying that our relationship has been fundamentally altered by what's happened. I can't ignore that. I can't go back to the way things were because that trust is broken. And without trust, we have nothing. The silence that followed was heavy, each second stretching painfully. Finally, James nodded, his expression one of resigned sadness. "If that's what you really want, then I'll respect it. I'm truly sorry, Mary." I felt a tear escape, quickly wiping it away. "I know you are. And I'm sorry too. This isn't what I wanted, but it's what I need to do for myself." The days that followed were a blur of muted interactions and strained conversations. Friends who had been at the party reached out, some with genuine concern, others with a curiosity that felt invasive. I found myself navigating a delicate balance, explaining the situation without divulging too much, trying to protect my privacy even in the wake of its breach. Some friends were supportive, offering their shoulders to cry on and their ears to listen. Others seemed more interested in the gossip, their questions probing for details that felt too raw to share. It was a lonely time, despite the well-meaning gestures, as I struggled to find a way forward. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the familiar tasks that required my full attention. Painting became my refuge. The act of creating something new. A therapeutic process that helped me process my emotions. Each stroke of the brush was a way to channel the pain, the disappointment, the anger. The canvas became a mirror of my inner turmoil, and as the days passed, the chaotic swirls of color slowly began to take form, reflecting my journey towards healing. I also started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages, unfiltered and raw. It was a way to make sense of the tangled web of emotions, to understand the why and the how of what had happened. Writing became a nightly ritual, a time for reflection and self-discovery. Through these creative outlets, I began to reclaim my sense of self. The betrayal had left scars, but it also taught me valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the importance of protecting what mattered most to me. I emerged from the experience stronger, more resolute, and more determined to live a life defined by my values, not by the expectations or judgments of others. As time passed, the initial sting of the betrayal faded, replaced by a quieter, more profound understanding of what I needed in a relationship. I knew that the next time I opened my heart to someone, it would be with a clearer sense of my own worth and a firmer grip on the boundaries that protected my peace. In the end, the breakup was not just an end but a beginning. It marked the start of a new chapter in my life, one where I was more attuned to my own needs and more protective of my own happiness. It was a hard-won lesson, but one that I carried with me as I moved forward, ready to face whatever came next with a renewed sense of purpose and strength.